Hello everyone, good morning or good afternoon wherever you are. I'm Chris Spinagle from the Warning Decision Train Division. I'd like to welcome you to today's Storm of the Month presentation. Today's presentation comes to you from the National Weather Service office in San Diego, California. Our presenter is Sam Connolly, who will be presenting flash flooding across Southern California from Tropical Storm Hilary. And with all that being said, Sam, the floor is yours, so go ahead and take it away.
All right. Hello, everybody. So before I kind of get into Hilary here, I wanted to talk a little bit about the tropical cyclone history in Southern California. So fairly frequently, I'd say once every year or two, we are impacted by tropical cyclone remnants, but very rarely do tropical storms actually maintain their tropical storm status coming up into Southern California. So the last one besides Hilary that did come into Southern California maintaining its tropical storm status was Nora back in 1997. You can see here it moved into Imperial County just to the east of us here. And there was a storm back in 1939 that made landfall over in Long Beach. But really, other than that, we've only really been affected by tropical cyclone remnants or extratropical cyclones. The pink line here was actually Hilary's path. It actually made landfall down here in Baja California and then moved up into Southern California after it made landfall. So we really don't have a lot of history with tropical storms actually moving into Southern California as tropical storms. So in the days leading up to Hilary, it was kind of an interesting setup that made Hilary take the path that it did take. So the left surface weather map here is showing the setup a couple days before Hilary moved up into Southern California. So we had this massive high over the central U.S. and southwest U.S. as well that was really steering Hilary pretty much due north into Baja and Southern California. And then on the right here, just showing that high continuing to persist with Hilary down here over in Baja. What was also really interesting about Hilary was when it was far south of Southern California over the tip of Baja, it did reach Category 4 status. So it was a pretty strong hurricane, and it was also moving pretty fast. So for those reasons, it was able to really maintain itself coming up into Southern California. It was moving very fast, and even though it was hitting colder waters, our water temps were between about, I think, 65 and 72 degrees when Hilary came up. So our water temps weren't anything really all that impressive, and it was weakening significantly as it moved up, but it was moving very fast, and it was able to maintain itself coming up into Southern California. So the first advisory for Hilary was issued on August 16th, so it did not impact Southern California until August 20th. But the very first issuance, very first advisory for Hilary, Southern California was in the cone. A little slice of San Diego County and up into Orange County was in the cone. And in the days after that, we continued to stay in the cone. And the Hurricane Center was actually showing it reaching Southern California as a tropical storm. So the track stayed very, very consistent. There were some slight wobbles to the east or west, but we always stayed within the cone in the days leading up to Hilary moving into Southern California. So that really helped our messaging. That really helped give us confidence that this was going to happen and that we would see impacts from it. So on the 17th, so this was 3 days before Hilary, we went ahead and put out a flood watch. It was maybe a little bit earlier than we would typically put out a flood watch. But with the confidence that we had that, Hilary would be impacting us in some way, we knew we were going to be getting a lot of moisture and a lot of rainfall from Hilary. So in coordination with the Oxnard office, we ended up putting out a flood watch pretty far in advance on the 17th. And we did collaborate with WPC at the time on some wording that we wanted to put in the flood watch. So down here in the red box here, we went with rare and dangerous flooding possible for our mountains and deserts. So we put that in all of our flooding products, and WPC used that wording as well in their products to kind of get the message across. This is going to be a very rare event for our mountains and deserts. On the right here was our storm total rainfall forecast for Hilary, showing the highest totals here in our mountains, the San Bernardino Mountains, Riverside, and San Diego Mountains. Generally, we were forecasting anywhere from 5 to 7 inches, upwards of 10 inches in a few spots. And then for our deserts here, Coachella Valley, Borrego Springs, we were looking at 4 to 5 inches of rainfall from Hilary. To kind of put this into perspective, for Palm Springs and Indio, the average yearly rainfall for those locations is 4 inches of rain. So we were looking at getting a year's worth of rain in our deserts from Hilary over the course of about 24 to 36 hours. So definitely a rare event for us getting that much rainfall over such a short period of time. On the 18th, so the day after we issued the flood watch, we had been in coordination with NHC ever since they put us in the cone. So we were coordinating with them on the potential issuance of tropical products for Southern California. So our office, WFO San Diego and WFO Los Angeles, we had just become tropical offices 2 months prior to Hilary. So back in June 2023, we got the ability to issue the entire suite of tropical products just a couple months prior. So we had a little bit of training from the tropical folks, but overall at our office, we hadn't really gone through a big training yet for issuing tropical products. But on the 18th, the NHC, in coordination with us, we put out a tropical storm watch for our entire area. And then about 12 hours later, we ended up putting out the tropical storm warning. This is me and my coworker, Elizabeth, working to put out the tropical products on the 18th. Like I said, we hadn't really had much training on how to do this, and we were coordinating with NHC, and they were such a big help to try to help us through this. And everything ended up working out perfectly, putting out the entire suite of tropical products for the very first time at our office. The winds with Hilary were quite a challenge, and they were definitely the most challenging forecast element that we had. The QPF was pretty consistent, but the winds, they were very tough to forecast. Typically ahead of tropical systems, we do get strong East Santa Ana winds in our mountains. And trying to depict that while also running the tropical wind tools was challenging. So we populate our winds and then we run the tropical wind tools after that. But the tropical wind tools actually wipe out any kind of terrain enhancements. So we really had a hard time depicting our mountains getting the strongest winds. As you can kind of see here in the left graphic, this was our forecast peak wind gust forecast for Hilary, and it just was not, our mountains were not depicted well at all with the tropical wind tools. And I know that's something they're working on, and they're hopefully get that out to us soon so that we could depict that better. That was definitely a challenge. And another challenge with the winds was communicating that winds were not going to be the biggest impact. We were going to have strong winds, especially in the mountains, but really flooding was going to be the biggest impact. So trying to communicate that with the tropical storm watch and warning products that we had out, trying to communicate that through media and to the public was definitely a challenge, and highlighting the flooding was really what we tried to do in our communication with those folks. So on day 3, so this would be the 18th, WPC did put us in a high-risk excessive rainfall outlook for day 3. For our mountains and deserts and a little bit into the Inland Empire here. Once WPC issued that high-risk excessive rainfall outlook, we did collaborate them to kind of increase the wording a bit in our products to say dangerous and locally catastrophic flooding impacts. And they included that in their excessive rainfall outlook, and we put that in all of our products and social media as well. So really increasing that wording to get the messaging out to our partners in the public that this was definitely going to be a rare and dangerous event for specifically our mountains and deserts. So in addition to all the WAWAs we put out and collaborating with the national centers, we were also pretty busy providing specialized IDSS support to our burn scar partners and our swiftwater planning partners. So here on the left is a briefing that we put out on the 19th for our El Dorado and Apple burn scar, which is up in the San Bernardino County Mountains. This burn scar is a 3-year-old burn scar. It happened back in 2020, and it's still experiencing debris flows and issues 3 years later. So we send them specialized forecasts, which include max hourly rainfall rates and rainfall totals as well. So I remember putting out this briefing. I was doing these briefings on the 19th, and I was looking at the high-res models, and they were going with 2 to 3 inch per hour rainfall rates for the burn scars and for the Coachella Valley as well. And I remember talking to my coworkers, and I'm like, am I absolutely crazy for believing the high-res models and thinking that, you know, these rainfall rates were going to be this high? And we just kind of got to thinking, and, you know, we know with tropical systems it's not uncommon to get 2 to 3 inch per hour rainfall rates. And we saw the potential there, so we went ahead and put that in our IDSS briefings to our partners. So here on the left, we have the Apple El Dorado, and I ended up going with an inch and a half to 1.75 inches for the burn scar there during the day on Sunday, which was the 20th. And then down here on the right is for our swiftwater planning, so the folks that work swiftwater rescues and environmental runoff as well. We provide them a briefing. And for the Coachella Valley here, I ended up going with 2 inches per hour rainfall rates. And I remember thinking if that actually materializes, like it's not going to be good. It's going to be very catastrophic if the 2 inch per hour rainfall rate verifies. But we saw the potential there, and we really wanted to get the message out to our partners. That's why we really increased those rates in the wording in those briefings so that they could be prepared for that potential. And our partners really, really take these briefings to heart and really make decisions based on our briefings. For pretty much every active burn scar that we have, there was some kind of evacuation in effect. So for the Apple and El Dorado burn scar, they ended up issuing an evacuation order, which is a mandatory evacuation. And then for our other burn scars, there's one in Orange County, and there are a couple in Riverside County as well. They ended up issuing evacuation warnings, which are voluntary. They make evacuation decisions based on the information we give them and how the rainfall rates compare to the debris flow thresholds that the USGS develops. So in addition to all of that and all the IDSS, we also did a ton of media interviews. We were just bombarded with media interviews. And here on the left here, my coworker Miguel, he's a fluent Spanish speaker, so he did a lot of Spanish briefings for the California Governor's Office and for other Spanish media as well. Down here on the bottom left, my coworker Adam, he was on the Weather Channel quite a few times. So I think that was his first time on the Weather Channel, which was really exciting. And then on the right here, we had some media actually come to our office and do live and recorded interviews from our office. And then on the day of Hilary, our WCM actually deployed to the San Diego County EOC to provide them support. So we were very busy in the few days leading up to the event, and it was really a team effort and all hands on deck for those few days. So moving into the day of the event, August 20th is when Hilary impacted us. So I wanted to show the 12Z NKX sounding here, very saturated, pretty much from the surface up to at least 300 millibars, just a deep moisture coming up into Southern California. It's not shown here, but the PW on the 12Z sounding was 2.21 inches, and then the 0Z sounding after that in the afternoon, once all the moisture had mostly moved through, we had a PW of 2.38 inches. To put that in perspective, here's the historical precipitable water charts. And so the highest PW ever recorded for our NKX sounding location was 2.69 inches back in August 1988. And the second highest ever was 2.38 inches back in August 1977. The 2.38 that was observed on the 0Z sounding in the afternoon of Hilary was the second highest PW. It tied for the second highest PW ever recorded at NKX. So just very moist, a lot of moisture coming up. Our local NKX radar, during Hilary, it was having some issues. So we had an issue with NKX where there was a cable that needed to be replaced, and it was only producing legacy products. We had no dual pole, and we had no MRMS available. So we only had legacy QPE that we could use to assess rainfall. And if you're not familiar with legacy QPE, it's not very good at all. It's just not good in general. And in this case, it was not good, and it was severely underestimating the rainfall rates. Just for an example, I was looking at some hourly rainfall rates in the Mount Laguna area of the San Diego County Mountains. we were seeing hourly rainfall rates of about 1.1 inches per hour, and the legacy QPE from NKX was giving me 0.2 to 0.3 inches per hour. So it was severely underestimating things like crazy, and it was just not useful. I ended up not using QPE at all to put out my flash flood warnings. Us and the surrounding offices also switched into the tropical VCP, VCP 112. So if NKX was, fully functional, I could have had a better idea of how that VCP was performing. But because NKX was only producing legacy, and legacy QP is just not good, it was really hard to kind of assess, how the tropical VCP behaved. To my recollection, I'm not sure we've ever used that before, so we really don't have a good sense of how it performs, since it's really only been used in the East Coast and Gulf Coast offices, and not really here in the Southwest. But overall, in general, our deserts are just not sampled well by radar to begin with. NKX, with the mountains there, it kind of overshoots our deserts quite a bit. And then with Yuma, it's quite far away from the Coachella Valley, so it doesn't sample it well either. So it's kind of a unique area where it's kind of radar sparse there to begin with. So when I was issuing the flash flood warnings on the day of Hilary, I really only relied on gauge data to be able to issue the warnings. Thankfully, here in Southern California, we have a pretty vast network of precip gauges. Our counties have really been proactive with putting out precip gauges in data sparse areas. We have a pretty good vast network of precip gauges and very few data sparse areas. So thankfully, the gauges were enough to be able to issue the warnings, but it would have been really nice to have some good QPE to compare it to as well. So looking at the hourly rainfall rates that were observed with Hilary, so the two pictures on the right here are showing our mountain areas. So the one in the middle here is near Mount Laguna. This was pretty early on in the event. We were seeing over 1 inch per hour rates. And over here on the right side, this is on the Apple El Dorado burn scar. We were seeing around 1.5 inches per hour in a few spots. And then this table over here is actually our burn scar dashboard for the Apple and El Dorado burn scar. They've installed precip gauges all across the burn scar so that we're able to monitor the rainfall rates there. And Raywood Flats here in the middle actually clocked an hourly rainfall rate of over 2 inches per hour. The 2 inch per hour rates were not very widespread. It was mostly between 1 inch and 1.5 inches overall. And this was for several hours on the afternoon of August 20th. It wasn't just 1 hour that, these high rainfall rates were observed. It was for 4, 5, 6 hours that we were seeing these high rainfall rates. Because of those, rainfall rates, we were putting out quite a few flash flood warnings. Throughout the event, we ended up issuing 12 flash flood warnings, 19 flood advisories, 1 severe, and 1 tornado warning. I wanted to, in particular, point out this flash flood warning here on the bottom left in our Coachella Valley. So that warning, I ended up putting out pretty early on when we were seeing hourly rainfall rates of around 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch per hour. I ended up putting it out pretty early just because the desert just floods so easily. And I saw radar trends, it wasn't really going to be stopping anytime soon. So I put that warning out. And as kind of the event unfolded in the Coachella Valley, I was looking at these rainfall rates. They just kept getting higher and higher, looking at like over 1 inch, between 1 inch and 1.5 inches per hour, just consistently falling over the Coachella Valley. And I just thought to myself, I was like, oh my goodness, like if, what impacts are going on right now? And I kept trying to find impacts because I was considering putting out a flash flood emergency just based on those high rainfall rates that they were observing. And I kept trying to find impacts and really wasn't seeing anything at the time. So I ended up sticking with the warning just because we really weren't getting any impacts, and I would really have liked to see some impacts before pulling the trigger on the emergency. And we didn't end up actually getting verification of swiftwater rescues and road closures until several hours after a flash flood emergency would have been useful. So that was unfortunate. We really didn't get those impacts until well after. But yeah, lots of flash flood warnings out for pretty much every inch of our mountains and deserts, if I remember correctly. So looking at the rainfall totals for the event. So this is our San Bernardino County mountains where we saw the most widespread high rainfall totals from Hilary. Overall, between 6 and 7 inches, fairly widespread across the San Bernardino County mountains. There were a few spots in excess of 9 inches, some approaching 10 inches up in the San Bernardino mountains from Hilary. Then moving a little bit further south here, looking at a portion of the Riverside County mountains in the Coachella Valley here. So the highest rainfall total from Hilary is actually not shown on this map because it came from one of our co-op observers at Mount San Jacinto State Park here at about 8,000 feet. They recorded a rainfall total of 11.74 inches. So that was the highest rainfall total that we were able to verify from Hilary was at Mount San Jacinto State Park there. Even in the Coachella Valley, fairly widespread 3 to 4 inch rainfall totals. And again, to put that in perspective, a year's worth of rainfall for them is about 4 inches. So they saw a year's worth of rainfall over the course of about 24 hours. Quite a rare event for them. And even though, the rainfall and the flooding was the biggest impact, I didn't want to leave out, the winds that we saw from Hilary. So we did get those strong east winds in our mountains ended up occurring. On the left here, we have the highest wind gusts PNS that we put out for the winds, and fairly widespread in our mountains, 60 to 70 mile per hour gusts. There were, a few sites that even recorded over 70 miles per hour. Big Black Mountain ended up hitting 84 miles per hour. And even in the urban areas, so San Diego urban areas are shown here in the middle. There were quite a few sites that did record over 40 mile per hour gusts, which is pretty unusual for at least the urban areas to see wind gusts that high. And then over here on the far right side is the Orange County urban areas, and quite a few over 40 as well for them. So even though, the winds were not quite as high in the urban areas, it was still pretty impactful. There were lots of trees down and things like that. So looking at the impacts from Hilary, I found a few videos. I think the videos really speak volumes here compared to the pictures. So I have a couple of videos to show here from the flash flooding in Coachella Valley. So this is from Palm Springs out in the Coachella Valley. Just lots of roads being inundated with water. So not only did the water fall in the Coachella Valley, but it actually came down from the mountains as well. So there was just a lot of water coming into the Coachella Valley and really nowhere for it to go. So it ended up inundating roads, inundating neighborhoods, inundating the golf courses there with really nowhere for the water to go. So here are just some pictures from some of the flash flooding impacts. I'll start on the right picture here. This is Highway 2 up in the San Bernardino County mountains near Brightwood. So you see there's a lot of mud and water there. There's actually a bridge underneath of it that was completely inundated by all this water and mud going through the channel. The middle picture here is the La Quinta Resort and Golf Course in the Coachella Valley, just being completely inundated with water from Hilary. The bottom left here, I thought this was a really interesting graphic of satellite view from the Coachella Valley. So this neighborhood up here is just completely inundated with water. And then this highway that's running here is I-10. And for about 12 hours or so, I believe, it was completely closed down. It was completely inundated with water, I-10, which is a pretty major road that goes through the Coachella Valley. It was just completely closed down. So all those cars were just waiting for it to open back up. And then the top right here is a home up in the Seven Oaks area. So this is up in the San Bernardino County mountains on the Apple El Dorado burn scar. Where there was an evacuation order in effect. So this house was just completely washed off its foundation and destroyed by floodwaters from Hilary. And unfortunately, there was a person in that home that ended up going missing, and I think is presumed deceased at this point from the floodwaters destroying the home. So looking at some more impacts here, so this is debris flows up in Oak Glen, which is on the Apple El Dorado burn scar up in the San Bernardino County mountains. So just debris flows coming down onto the road and completely filling up and overtopping channels here. Here's some more pictures from the impacts. So starting on the right here, so This was a picture in Cathedral City, which is in the Coachella Valley, of 14 residents being rescued from an assisted living facility by a bulldozer. So these residents were trapped in their facility by mud and floodwaters. I believe I read there was 3 to 4 feet of mud just in their assisted living facility, and they, because those folks were not really all that mobile, they were needing to be rescued. And as you can see, the road is just completely covered in mud, so cars were not really able to get in there and help them. So the fire department had to bring in a bulldozer to rescue those people, and they were successfully rescued, all of them, thankfully. And then here in the middle picture is in San Diego County on State Route 98. This goes through the mountains, just massive boulders the size of school buses coming down off the hill and needing to be moved before the lanes could be opened back up again. And then on the left here, State Route 38 in Angeles Oaks was washed away by floodwaters here and needed to be repaired. So lots of road impacts and roads being washed away from these floodwaters. So yeah, that's all I have. This is me and my coworkers on the day of the event. We had been working, I think, 10 or 11 hours at this point when this picture was taken. Thanks everyone for attending, and I will take any questions.
All right, thank you, Sam, for that very interesting presentation about a very high impact recent flash flood event. I appreciate you taking the time to put this together so quickly after this event. I know having lived in LA for 4 years myself, I definitely fielded some questions from friends that were wondering the impacts of everything. So high visibility, definitely very interesting. I'll go ahead and thank Sam for her wonderful presentation. We actually don't have a presentation lined up for October, so we're going to go ahead and punt on that presentation next month. So our next presentation will be late November, November 29th. We do have presenters lined up. We've got Pierce Larkin and Matthew Gropp from WFO Columbia. They'll be talking about a surprise QLCS tornado event. So that'll be the next one that we have going on. So stay tuned for that next announcement. And thank you again, Sam, and thank you all for your attendance. Have a good rest of your day.